My daughter called on a Thursday night. Her voice was sweet, too sweet, the kind of tone people use when they're trying to sell you something. "Mom, why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We want to celebrate," I asked. "Celebrate what?" "Oh, just family," she said. It's been too long. That was true. But the way she said it made my stomach twist. Still, I agreed. Mothers do that. We say yes even when something feels off. Saturday came bright and humid. Georgia heat always feels like it's wrapping around your bones. I put on my navy blue dress, the one my late husband used to say made me look like a senator's wife. I even brought a pie. Because no matter how old your kids get, you still show up with dessert. Lauren's house looked perfect, like it was staged for a real estate photo. The smell of candles hit me before I even stepped in. She opened the door all smiles, kissed my cheek and said, "You look amazing, Mom." She'd never said that in her life. Inside, her husband Michael was setting the table, quiet and polite as always. Abby, my granddaughter, waved from the kitchen. She's 17, still has that half-grown, half-wise look teenagers get when they start realizing adults don't know what they're doing either. Lauren poured wine, talking about how she'd been taking charge of things lately. Her job, her bills, our family future. She dropped little hints like that, fishing for a reaction. I nodded, smiled, didn't bite. On the dining table was a neat stack of papers clipped together. I could see the title in bold, Power of Attorney. I said, "What's that doing here?" Lauren smiled, too bright. "Oh, just something for later. Let's not ruin dinner with boring paperwork." Boring paperwork, the same kind of boring that can leave you broke if you blink. Dinner started normal enough. Roast chicken, salad that looked like it came out of a food commercial, too many glasses clinking. But there was a strange calm in the air, like everyone was trying too hard to act happy. Michael kept checking his phone. Abby asked if she could skip church Sunday to study. Lauren said, "We'll talk about it later," in that sharp tone she used to copy from me when she was 16. I laughed to myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Halfway through dinner, she raised her glass. "To family," she said, "and to new beginnings." Her eyes held mine a little too long. I picked up my glass and tapped hers. To family. The sound of crystal meeting crystal was sharper than usual. The conversation rolled on about bills, renovations, college funds, every topic that makes you wish you'd stayed home with leftover soup. I smiled, nodded, played along, all while trying to ignore the sense that I was the guest of honor at my own setup. At one point, Abby leaned in and whispered, "Grandma, do you like your wine? Mom bought a new bottle just for you." That made me glance down at my glass. It was fuller than everyone else's. Lauren's laughter carried from the kitchen as she fetched dessert. Her husband's phone buzzed again and he looked like a man waiting for a rescue helicopter. Something about the air shifted. The candles flickered, or maybe I just noticed they were uneven. The smell of vanilla was suddenly too strong. When Lauren came back, she set a small plate of lemon pie in front of me. "Your favourite," she said. Then she smiled, that practiced, polite smile you see in women who think they've just won something. I took a small bite, set down my fork and said, "This is lovely." Inside my chest felt tight, but not from the food. From the memory of every time I'd bailed her out, covered her debts, defended her choices, thinking she'd eventually grow out of this need to control everything around her, including me. It was funny, the older she got, the more she started treating me like a piece of property that needed managing. I sipped my wine, slow, steady, eyes on her. She talked too much that night about how things will be easier soon, about not worrying anymore. There's a tone people have when they think they're in charge. It's the same one I used to hear from lawyers, salesmen, and my late husband's doctor before bad news. So I smiled back. Because if she wanted a performance, I could give her one. Lauren reached over to top off my glass again, saying, "You deserve to relax tonight, Mom." I said, "You're right, I really do." That's when I noticed the look Michael gave her, quick, nervous, like he knew something I didn't. And for the first time all night, I thought, maybe he wasn't the quiet one, maybe he was the scared one. Still, I lifted the glass, gave a little toast of my own. "To peace and quiet," I said. She laughed. "You've earned it." Oh, I had, more than she'd ever understand. If you've ever had dinner that changed the way you look at your own family, tell me in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not the only one who's tasted something bitter and called it love. And if stories like this hit close to home, go ahead and subscribe. You might just find your own reflection somewhere in the next one. I didn't finish the pie. The room felt too still, like the calm before a storm that doesn't bother to announce itself. So I just smiled, folded my napkin, and waited to see what would happen next. The fork was still warm in my hand when I felt something shift in the air. The kind of silence that doesn't belong in a house full of laughter. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but when people whisper with guilt, it's like my ears grow 10 years younger. From the kitchen, I caught her voice. "Make sure that's her glass. She'll be out before dessert." I froze. Michael's answer came quick, hushed, terrified. "Lauren, are you sure? That's too much." "It's harmless," she said. "Just a little melatonin. She'll sleep. I'll handle the papers." I stood still long enough to feel my pulse in my fingertips. My daughter's voice so calm, so practical, as if drugging your own mother was part of a weekend to-do list. I didn't breathe. I just watched the reflection in the oven door, Lauren moving, pouring, adjusting the glasses. She placed the one nearest the head of the table, mine, and smiled to herself before carrying the tray out. When I stepped into the dining room, the lights looked brighter than before, and everyone's laughter sounded rehearsed. She slid the wine glass toward me, fingers brushing the rim. "Your favourite, Mom? Cabernet, right?" I smiled. "You remembered." I waited until her back was turned to grab a serving spoon. With one clean motion, I switched our glasses, hers for mine. You'd be surprised how easy betrayal makes you efficient. When she came back, she sat down, took a sip, and gave me that look people give when they think they've already won. I clinked my glass with hers, slow, deliberate. "To family," she said again. I met her eyes. "To family." The next 10 minutes were something out of a slow-motion nightmare. She talked non-stop about her plans for the house, for my future, for how she'd take care of everything so I could finally rest. Every word sounded like a confession pretending to be affection. She took another sip. Her laugh started to slur just slightly. I noticed Michael's hand tighten around his napkin. Abby looked from one face to another, sensing tension but too polite to ask. Lauren leaned forward, smiling. "You trust me, right, Mom?" I said. "I used to." Her smile flickered, but she covered it fast with a laugh. "You're funny." "Not really," I said. She blinked, confused, then reached for her glass again. By the time dessert came out, lemon pie and all, she was blinking too slow, her fork dragging across the plate. "Mom," she murmured, "you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I said. Her face went pale, then pink. Michael half stood up, uncertain what to do. Abby said something about calling a doctor, but Lauren waved it off, mumbling, "Just tired." I watched her head lower toward her plate like a puppet with the strings cut. Michael panicked. "Laurie!" I stood, set my napkin on the table and said, "She'll be fine. She just needs rest." Abby looked scared and I reached out, touched her shoulder. "Honey, why don't you get her some water?" While they scrambled around, I collected my plate, walked to the sink and rinsed it off. The sound of running water felt louder than anything else in the house. Michael called an ambulance, his voice shaking. I stood near the counter, looking at the 2 wine glasses still sitting side by side. Mine was empty, hers was half full. When the paramedics arrived, they moved quickly, checking pulse, vitals, breathing. One of them said it looked like exhaustion or maybe stress. Lauren had no clue where she was, Michael tried to explain, fumbling. She's been under a lot of pressure lately." They nodded, carried her out on a stretcher. I watched from the doorway, arms folded, as the red lights faded down the street. The house felt smaller, like all the air had been replaced with the weight of what I now knew for certain. My own daughter saw me as an obstacle. I walked back inside and started collecting the wine glasses. The faint smell of lavender cleaner mixed with the bitterness of the leftover Cabernet. I set her glass in the sink, noticed the faint trace of white powder at the bottom. "Melatonin," she said. "Harmless." "Sure." I stared at the residue until it swirled down the drain. For a second I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I might have screamed. The house was quiet again. Michael sat on the couch, head in his hands. Abby came in from the porch, red-eyed. "Grandma," she whispered. "What happened?" "Your mom's just tired," I said softly. "We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded, hesitant, like she knew that wasn't the full truth, but didn't have the courage to ask. When they left for the hospital, I locked the door behind them and stood in the hallway listening to the refrigerator hum. My reflection in the window didn't look angry. It looked awake. That was the strangest part. It didn't feel like revenge or shock. It felt like clarity, like finally seeing the picture straight after years of pretending the frame wasn't crooked. I went to the dining table, stacked the remaining dishes, and noticed the papers still sitting there. Power of attorney. A neat line waited for my signature. The pen lay right beside it, uncapped, ready. I smiled, slid the stack into a drawer, and turned off the light. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The night dragged its feet. I didn't turn on the TV or the lights. Just sat my kitchen table, staring at nothing. The smell of Cabernet still lingered on my hands, mixed with lemon pie and betrayal. I washed them twice, but it didn't leave. At midnight, the phone rang. Michael's number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "She's home now," he said. His voice was tight, dry. "They said it was probably exhaustion." "Exhaustion?" I said. "That must be contagious." He didn't reply. I heard him sigh, then hang up. The next morning I woke up early. Habit, I guess. The sunlight hit the kitchen counter where the papers had been. I tucked them away, but their outlines still felt burned into the wood. I made coffee, sat down, and watched the steam rise. My phone buzzed again. Abby this time. "Mom says you left early." "Are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I typed back. "Just needed air." 3 dots flashed, then disappeared. No reply. That girl always knew when to stop asking. Around 9, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Michael standing there, unshaven, looking like he hadn't slept. "She's embarrassed," he said, "wants to apologize." "Apologize for what exactly?" I asked. He shifted his weight. "For how she talked to you, for the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," I repeated. "That's one word for it." He rubbed his face. "She didn't mean any harm. You know how she gets when she's under pressure." "Oh, I know exactly how she gets," I said. "She's your wife. You live with her." "But she's still my daughter. I've been watching her get this way for 40 years. He didn't argue, just stared at the floor. I noticed he hadn't brought coffee, flowers, or even an excuse that sounded rehearsed. Just the look of a man tired of cleaning up someone else's mess. "Tell her I hope she feels better," I said, "and tell her I'll be in touch." He hesitated. "You're not angry?" "I'm awake," I said. "That's enough for now." When he left, I sat back down and opened my laptop. My online banking page glared back at me with too many numbers that didn't look right. Transactions labelled transfer, loan payment, electronic authorization. I scrolled. A pattern appeared, small amounts every week, building up to thousands. My stomach dropped. I clicked through the tabs, my pulse quickening. Then I saw it. Authorized secondary account holder, Lauren Porter Hayes. The air went cold. She hadn't just tried to knock me out. She'd already been digging through my pockets for months. I printed the statement, then opened the kitchen drawer where I'd stashed the power of attorney. It was still there, neat and patient, like it knew I'd be back. I studied the line for my signature, half-filled, shaky. My penmanship was perfect, which meant someone else's wasn't. The signature was a copy. My hand twitched, tracing the letters. Lauren had forged it. Not even well. Just confident enough that she thought I'd never check. I reached into my purse and took out the little bottle cap I'd picked up from the dining room floor the night before. The label read Melatonin Plus. Not the grocery store kind, the imported kind that knocks you out for half a day. I placed it next to the forged paper, 2 trophies of her arrogance. Outside, a car door slammed. I looked through the curtain, Michael backing out of the driveway. He didn't look back toward the house. The phone rang again, Lauren this time. "Mom," she started, voice soft like a rehearsed apology ad. "I'm so sorry about last night. I think I mixed up the glasses. I wasn't feeling well." "You mixed them up?" I said. "Yes, I must have. You know how tired I've been." I said. "You looked well rested when you left." Her voice faltered. "Can we talk? Maybe come over tonight?" "I'm busy," I said. "Doing what?" "Waking up." There was a pause long enough to hear her breathing tighten. "Mom, please, I didn't mean." "Lauren," I said quietly, "you remember what you told me when you were 12? You said lying gets easier if you stop feeling bad about it." "You were right." I hung up. For a long minute, I just sat there staring at the black screen of my phone. The reflection looking back wasn't the woman who'd raised her. It was the woman who finally understood her. I opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid the forged POA papers inside, then the bank printouts, and finally the bottle cap. The sound of paper sliding against paper was strangely satisfying. When I sealed it, I wrote on the front in small, steady letters, "Truth." I poured myself more coffee. The bitterness tasted right. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a courtroom waiting for a case to start. The window light caught the corner of the envelope, glowing faintly. I reached over, turned it face down. Justice doesn't need to announce itself. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning the kitchen, washing the plates, throwing away the leftover pie. The smell of lemon and soap covered everything, and for once it didn't bother me. By the time the clock hit noon, I'd already decided my next step. I grabbed my purse, the envelope, and walked outside. The air felt heavy, like a secret about to be spoken aloud. I didn't lock the door. There was no reason to. No one left in my life wanted anything that couldn't already be stolen. At the end of the driveway, I paused to check my reflection in the car window. No fear, no sadness, just clarity. That was new. I started the engine, and as the tyres crunched over the gravel, I thought about how quiet the house had been. Too quiet for someone who just lost everything. The gravel was still crunching under my tyres when I realised I didn't know where I was going. I wasn't running from anything. I just didn't want to breathe the same air that still smelled like her lies. I ended up in town, parking in front of the credit union. The glass door gleamed too clean for a building that held this much quiet theft. Inside, the air smelled of paper and air freshener, the fake lavender kind. A young woman behind the counter smiled too brightly. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I need to review authorizations on my accounts," I said. "All of them." Her smile dimmed slightly, replaced by professionalism. "Of course, let me just verify your identity." We went through the routine. Date of birth, last four of my social security, my late husband's name. My voice was steady, even though I felt my pulse pushing at my temples. She clicked through screens, typing fast. "Looks like you have 3 active accounts. Checking, savings, and an investment account. Would you like to review specific transactions?" "All of them," I said. Her fingers paused. "That may take a while." "I've got time," I said. "More than I used to." It took her about 10 minutes to pull everything up. When she turned the monitor toward me, the columns of numbers looked like a confession written in code. Transfers to L. Hayes, monthly withdrawals marked as household support, recurring payments to Elite Academy tuition. And one note that made my jaw tighten: mortgage autopay, authorized by secondary holder. I pointed at the screen. "Who's the secondary holder?" She scrolled. "Lauren Hayes. Same last name?" "She's my daughter," I said. "Oh," the woman said, voice softening with the kind of pity reserved for people who've just discovered their family isn't family. "Would you like to remove her authorization?" "Yes," I said, "and suspend all transfers." She hesitated. "All?" "Yes, every single one." Her fingers hovered, then she clicked something final. The sound of that keyboard felt like a gavel. When I walked out, the air smelled sharper, like the world had more oxygen now that I wasn't financing someone else's comfort. I stopped by the pharmacy on my way home and bought a new lockbox. I wasn't hiding money, I was protecting sanity. Back at the house, I pulled out every old file, every bill, every receipt. The kitchen table filled up like a decade of unpaid honesty. There were notes in Lauren's handwriting, little reminders she'd left herself when I still thought she was helping me with the bills. Transfer on the 15th. Ask Mom for account password. Mortgage cleared. Thank her. Thank me. She'd thanked me for her theft like it was a favour I'd done for her. I found copies of checks too, photocopies of the ones I'd signed years ago. Some had been altered. The numbers didn't match. $200 became $2,000. $1,500 became $15,000. I sat back and stared at them. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't shocked, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from realising every favour you ever gave was an investment in someone else's betrayal. In the bottom drawer of my desk, I found something worse. A life insurance policy. My name, her signature as beneficiary. That one made me laugh. Not loud, not bitter, just one dry sound that felt too small for how enormous the truth had become. I called my lawyer's office and asked for Richard. He'd handled my husband's will years ago, back when I still thought love and paperwork were the same thing. "Mrs. Porter," he said when he came on the line, voice warm and steady. "It's been a while." "Yes," I said, "and I think it's about to be longer. I need to make changes." "To your will?" "To everything." He paused. "You sound calm." "I've had practice," I said. He gave a short, careful chuckle. "Why don't you come in tomorrow? We'll go over it all." I thanked him, hung up, and looked around the kitchen. The light hit the empty wine glasses still drying on the rack. I picked one up, the same kind Lauren had tried to poison me with, and held it up to the window. The glass caught the sunlight like it wanted to look innocent again. There was something poetic about that, if I was still the kind of woman who cared for poetry. I set the glass down, turned off the light, and went to the den. The house felt quieter, lighter somehow, as if every truth I'd unearthed had made more space to breathe. At the desk, I started a new list on a yellow notepad. No more groceries, no more phone bills, no more tuition, no more temporary loans. At the top, I wrote one line in capital letters: "No one owns my kindness anymore." The pen left a small dent in the paper from the pressure. I didn't care. That mark was mine. I took the manila envelope I'd labelled "Truth," slid in the latest findings, bank printouts, forged checks, the policy, and set it beside my purse. The next knock on my door wasn't from Michael this time. It was the mailman. He handed me a thick envelope from the mortgage company, probably their next payment notice. I smiled as I took it, unopened. That problem wasn't mine anymore. When the mail truck drove off, I stood on the porch for a while, the autumn air brushing against my face. The neighbourhood looked the same, but everything in it had changed. The same houses, same fences, same polite people pretending not to see each other's cracks. I used to envy that kind of denial. Now I pitied it. Inside, the clock ticked steady, not fast, not slow, just enough to remind me I wasn't waiting for anyone. Lauren might have thought I'd sleep through her scheme, but she'd forgotten something crucial. I raised her. I knew her tells before she even spoke. And now I was finally ready to teach her what silence really meant. The next morning, I opened my eyes before the alarm. The house was quiet, too still, the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but distance. The coffee machine sputtered like it was trying to fill the space with sound. It didn't help much. I sat by the window, phone in hand, scrolling through the account statements I'd printed the day before. Numbers lined up neatly like obedient soldiers, but I could see the war they'd been fighting behind my back. Lauren hadn't just taken. She'd built a life on my name. Loans, payments, credit cards. Every transaction whispered the same thing. "You'll never notice. You trust me too much." She was right for a while. The phone buzzed on the counter, her name again. I didn't answer. A minute later, another message. "Lauren, Mom, can we talk? Please. I think you're overreacting." Overreacting. The same word she used when she crashed her first car, when she spent her student loan on a Cancun trip, when she missed her dad's funeral because she lost track of time. No, I thought, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally reacting. I finished my coffee and drove into town. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up whether you want it to or not. My next stop wasn't the bank this time. It was the courthouse. Inside, the clerk barely looked up when I explained I needed access to public property records. "Just fill this out," she sliding a form across the counter. 10 minutes later, I had the information in hand. The deed to Lauren and Michael's house, the one I'd helped pay for, was listed under their names and mine, co-signed. I'd forgotten that part, or maybe she'd made sure I did. She hadn't just borrowed from me. She'd built her life on me like a foundation she assumed would never crack. Driving home, I passed a boutique cafe downtown. Lauren used to brag about it, the one with overpriced coffee and minimalist art that looked like someone sneezed on a canvas. I pulled over. Through the glass, I saw her sitting there, alone, phone in hand, perfect posture, hair flawless, like nothing had happened. She noticed me before I could drive away. Her face froze, then melted into a practiced smile. She waved, motioning for me to come inside. Against my better judgment, I parked and went in. "Mom," she said as I sat down, "I'm glad you came. I didn't think you would." "Neither did I." She reached for my hand across the table. "Listen, I know things got tense, but I think we can fix this." "Fix what?" She sighed like she was the one exhausted. The misunderstanding, the accounts, the dinner. It was a mistake. You always assume the worst. I leaned back. You drugged my wine, forged my signature, and drained my savings. Forgive me for assuming the worst. Her eyes darted around, checking who might be listening. Keep your voice down. Oh, I don't need to raise it. You've already said everything that matters. She looked hurt for exactly 3 seconds before slipping into her professional tone. Mom, I've been under pressure. We've had some debts. And what kind of debts? She hesitated. A few credit cards, the house, some medical stuff. Nothing serious. How much? Her silence was the answer. I waited. She swallowed, eyes darting to her latte like it could save her. About 130,000. I exhaled slowly. And your plan was to solve that by killing my credit. And me? It wasn't like that, she said sharply. You make everything sound dramatic. It was just supposed to calm you down. You've been so paranoid about money lately. I stared at her, not blinking. You mean the money that's been paying for your mistakes? She flinched. You don't understand what it's like, Mom. Everything's expensive now. You grew up when life was simple. You don't know what it's like to struggle. I do, I said. I just didn't call it a lifestyle. She leaned forward. You've always had control. You make me feel like a failure. Every time you help, it's like you're saying I can't do anything myself. Maybe because you can't, I said quietly. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, she didn't have a speech prepared. The waitress dropped off the bill. Lauren grabbed it, waving her card like it was a statement of independence. It declined. The corner of my mouth twitched, not from joy, but recognition. Her whole life was borrowed. I stood up, sliding a 20 on the table. Get some rest, Lauren. You look exhausted. The words landed like a stone. On my drive home, I didn't feel guilt or victory, just stillness. The kind that comes when denial finally gives up the fight. At home, the phone blinked with new messages. Michael, Abby, even one from an unknown number. I turned it face down and went to the garden instead. The air smelled like rain coming. I knelt beside the lavender bush I'd planted years ago, the one that had nearly died last winter. I'd been ready to dig it up, but then spring came, and it bloomed again, small but stubborn. That's what surviving felt like. Not revenge, just endurance that finally pays off. I brushed the soil from my hands and looked toward the house, where the lights glowed warm against the evening sky. Somewhere inside that light sat a folder with Lauren's forged documents, her fake smiles, her debts, her plans. And now it was my turn to plan. The lavender in the garden had started to bloom again, pale purple and stubborn. I stood there for a long moment before heading inside. The house was quiet, honest quiet, not the kind that hides things. I made a cup of tea and sat at the table covered in paperwork, forged checks, fake signatures, records of what my kindness had bought her. It was time to make it official. I called Richard Davidson's office. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Porter, he said, his voice warm and composed. I was expecting you. I'm ready, I said. He chuckled softly. I thought you might be. When I arrived at his office, the secretary greeted me like I was there to renew a driver's license. I admired that. People who don't ask questions about pain. Richard's office was the same as it had been 15 years ago. Leather chairs, a shelf of legal books that looked unread, and that faint scent of dust and logic. Let's start with what matters most, he said. Who are we protecting? My granddaughter, I said without hesitation. Abby Hayes, 17. She's got the heart her mother lost somewhere along the way. He nodded, jotting her name down carefully. So we're transferring assets to her? Not directly, I said. I want a trust, education, housing, future, all protected, and I don't want Lauren or Michael anywhere near it. He raised an eyebrow. Completely separate then? Revocable? For now, I said, until I know Abby's ready. He adjusted his glasses. And what about your current power of attorney? I almost laughed. The forged one? Ah, he nodded knowingly. We'll revoke that and file an affidavit stating your intent to replace it. I'll notarize it myself. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. Men like Richard had seen this story play out in 100 families. Kindness mistaken for currency, loyalty traded for comfort. We went over every account, every clause. I signed slowly, carefully, pressing each letter into the page like I was carving a warning into stone. When it was done, he handed me the final folder. You've taken back control, he said. That's rarer than you think. I smiled faintly. I'm not sure it's control. Maybe just clarity. He leaned back. Sometimes that's the same thing. On the way home, I stopped by the bakery. Abby loved their cherry tarts, and I liked the idea of having something sweet waiting for her. It was strange, planning a future again after spending so many years being everyone else's backup plan. At home, I sat in the living room, the folder on my lap. The papers inside represented everything Lauren had tried to steal. Not just money, but agency, identity, the right to my own decisions. The phone buzzed. Her name again. I didn't answer. The voicemail came through instead. "Mom," she said, her tone clipped and calm like she was practicing for a courtroom she'd built in her head. "I just heard from the bank. Did you cancel the payments? Because the mortgage company called, and Abby's tuition payment bounced. This isn't like you. Can you please call me back so we can fix this?" I let it play twice. Every word sounded like panic dressed up as reason. I poured myself another cup of tea. By evening, I got a text from Michael. Short. Nervous. Michael, hey, not sure what's going on, but the bills came back unpaid. Are you okay? Me, better than I've been in years. No reply after that. Around 7, the phone rang again. Abby this time. "Grandma," she said softly. "Mom's really upset. She says something's wrong with the accounts." "Nothing's wrong," I said. "They just stopped being hers." She was quiet for a moment. I figured. That girl was sharp. I could hear her thinking it through. "She's not telling me everything," Abby said, "but I can tell she's scared." "She should be," I said. "Fear's what happens when people finally meet the consequences they ordered years ago." Abby didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "You sound calm." "I am," I said. "Calm isn't weakness. It's focus." We talked a little longer about school, her classes, her part-time job at the library, the ordinary things. That's what I loved most. She didn't treat me like an old woman living out a soap opera. After she hung up, I went back to the table. The folder lay open under the warm kitchen light. I traced the embossed seal with my finger. Davidson and Associates, attorneys at law. I thought of Lauren sitting somewhere across town, realizing her grip was gone. Maybe she'd throw a tantrum. Maybe she'd pretend to apologize. It didn't matter. The house she lived in wasn't hers anymore, not the one with bricks, not the one built from my trust. I walked out to the porch. The air had that faint coolness that comes before rain. I could almost hear the garden breathing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing on borrowed ground. The streetlights flicked on one by one, and I watched the soft glow spill across the fence. Behind me, the house was still, the papers signed, the trust locked, the money safe. Peace doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It just settles in quietly, like an old friend who finally found her way home. By the next afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself she wouldn't show up. Lauren never liked facing consequences. She preferred managing them from a safe distance with charm and half-truths. But when the doorbell rang at 3 sharp, I didn't even flinch. Through the glass, I saw her standing there with that polite smile she saved for neighbours and bank tellers. A bouquet of white lilies in her hand, of course. Subtle as a guilt trip. "Mom," she said when I opened the door, "you look wonderful." "I always do," I said. "What do you want?" She blinked, thrown off by the lack of warm-up. "Just to talk. Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she still owned the air, scanning the living room as if expecting to see proof of her absence. The flowers dangled awkwardly from her hand. "Put those on the counter," I said. "They'll last longer there." She did, and when she turned around, her tone softened into that syrupy sweetness she used whenever she needed something. "I've been so worried about you. You've been acting different." "Different," I repeated. "You mean aware?" She forced a laugh. "Mom, come on. You've always been dramatic. I made one mistake and now you're treating me like—" "You made several," I interrupted. "But you're right. Let's not exaggerate." For a moment she didn't know what to say. Her jaw worked, her face twitching through expressions like a Rolodex of failed performances. Finally she exhaled. "I know you're angry. I shouldn't have done what I did at dinner. I just wanted peace. We've all been on edge, and I thought that drugging your mother would make it better." Her voice rose. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I asked. Was it like signing my name on documents you forged, or draining my account for a house I don't live in? Was it like that?" Her face flushed. You checked the accounts. Of course I did, I said. I raised you, Lauren. You never could keep your fingers out of what didn't belong to you. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, she sat down on the couch, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. I made some bad choices, she said finally, but I was desperate. You don't know what it's like to be drowning in bills and pretending everything's fine. I thought you'd understand. I do understand, I said. I just stopped pretending. Her eyes glistened like she was about to cry, but I knew her too well. Those tears were negotiators. You don't get it, Mom, she said softly. Everything costs more now. Schools, insurance, everything. We just needed a little help to get through. You mean you needed me to keep funding your lifestyle? I said. The spa trips, the new car, the home renovations. You called it family support, but really, it was a subscription plan with my name on the credit card. Her mouth trembled. You don't have to be cruel. I'm not, I said evenly. I'm just done paying for your kindness lessons. The silence between us stretched thin. I could hear the old clock ticking from the hallway. Finally, she asked, "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "It's already done." Her eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means your access is gone. The accounts are closed. The trust is written. You don't own me anymore." She stood up, panic flickering behind her composure. "Mom, this isn't fair. You can't just cut us off. What about Abby? What about Michael?" "Abby's fine," I said. "Michael's a grown man. You, on the other hand, are finally going to learn what no feels like." She swallowed hard, trying to pull herself back into control. "You're making a mistake. You can't isolate yourself. You need family." "I have family," I said. "You're just not in the category right now." Her voice broke into a desperate whisper. "You can't mean that." I smiled faintly. "You slept well that night, didn't you?" She froze. "What?" "That night at dinner," I said, keeping my tone light, almost casual. "You said I'd be out before dessert, but you slept like a baby instead." The colour drained from her face. You knew?" "From the beginning." For a second she didn't move, then she laughed, a thin, nervous sound. "So you think this is revenge?" "No," I said. "It's balance." The clock ticked again. She glanced toward the window like she might bolt. But instead she gathered her purse and said, "I can't believe you'd do this to your own daughter." "You started it," I said, "when you stopped being one." She left without another word. The lilies stayed behind. I picked them up, carried them to the trash and dropped them in. They made a soft, hollow sound as they hit the bottom of the bin. That sound was peace. I washed my hands, wiped down the counter, and looked out at the yard. The light was changing, the sky a softer blue than it had been all week. I thought about Abby, how much of her mother she'd inherited, but also how much she'd escaped. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. It's not relief or triumph, it's freedom that doesn't need applause. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, opened the window to let in the cool air, and let the breeze carry out whatever was left of her perfume lingering in the hallway. By the next afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself she wouldn't show up. Lauren never liked facing consequences. She preferred managing them from a safe distance, with charm and half-truths. But when the doorbell rang at 3 sharp, I didn't even flinch. Through the glass, I saw her standing there with that polite smile she saved for neighbours and bank tellers, a bouquet of white lilies in her hand, of course. Subtle as a guilt trip. "Mom," she said when I opened the door, "you look wonderful." "I always do," I said. "What do you want?" She blinked, thrown off by the lack of warm-up. "Just to talk. Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she still owned the air, scanning the living room as if expecting to see proof of her absence. The flowers dangled awkwardly from her hand. "Put those on the counter," I said. "They'll last longer there." She did, and when she turned around, her tones softened into that syrupy sweetness she used whenever she needed something. "I've been so worried about you. You've been acting different." "Different," I repeated. "You mean aware?" She forced a laugh. "Mom, come on. You've always been dramatic. I made one mistake and now you're treating me like—" "You made several," I interrupted. "But you're right. Let's not exaggerate." For a moment she didn't know what to say. Her jaw worked, her face twitching through expressions like a Rolodex of failed performances. Finally she exhaled. "I know you're angry. I shouldn't have done what I did at dinner. I just wanted peace. We've all been on edge, and I thought, that drugging your mother would make it better? Her voice rose. It wasn't like that! Then what was it like? I asked. Was it like signing my name on documents you forged? Or draining my account for a house I don't live in? Was it like that? Her face flushed. You checked the accounts. Of course I did, I said. I raised you, Lauren. You never could keep your fingers out of what didn't belong to you. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, she sat down on the couch, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. I made some bad choices, she said finally, but I was desperate. You don't know what it's like to be drowning in bills and pretending everything's fine. I thought you'd understand. I do understand, I said. I just stopped pretending. Her eyes glistened like she was about to cry, but I knew her too well. Those tears were negotiators. You don't get it, Mom, she said softly. Everything costs more now. Schools, insurance, everything. We just needed a little help to get through. You mean you needed me to keep funding your lifestyle, I said. The spa trips, the new car, the home renovations. You called it family support, but really it was a subscription plan with mine the credit card. Her mouth trembled. You don't have to be cruel. I'm not, I said evenly. I'm just done paying for your kindness lessons. The silence between us stretched thin. I could hear the old clock ticking from the hallway. Finally, she asked, What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. It's already done. Her eyes widened. What does that mean? It means your access is gone. The accounts are closed. The trust is written. You don't own me anymore. She stood up, panic flickering behind her composure. Mom, this isn't fair. You can't just cut us off. What about Abby? What about Michael? Abby's fine, I said. Michael's a grown man. You, on the other hand, are finally going to learn what no feels like. She swallowed hard, trying to pull herself back into control. You're making a mistake. You can't isolate yourself. You need family. I have family, I said. You're just not in the category right now. Her voice broke into a desperate whisper. You can't mean that. I smiled faintly. You slept well that night, didn't you? She froze. What? That night at dinner, I said, keeping my tone light, almost casual. You said I'd be out before dessert, but you slept like a baby instead. The colour drained from her face. You knew? From the beginning. For a second she didn't move. Then she laughed, a thin, nervous sound. So you think this is revenge? No, I said. It's balance. The clock ticked again. She glanced toward the window like she might bolt. But instead she gathered her purse and said, I can't believe you'd do this to your own daughter. You started it, I said, when you stopped being one. She left without another word. The lilies stayed behind. I picked them up, carried them to the trash and dropped them in. They made a soft, hollow sound as they hit the bottom of the bin. That sound was peace. I washed my hands, wiped down the counter and looked out at the yard. The light was changing, the sky a softer blue than it had been all week. I thought about Abby, how much of her mother she'd inherited, but also how much she'd escaped. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people who never listened. It's not relief or triumph, it's freedom that doesn't need applause. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, opened the window to let in the cool air and let the breeze carry out whatever was left of her perfume, lingering in the hallway. Download as audio. Bạn đã nói, viết phần tiếp theo 800 to 900 từ, bám sát dàn ý, luôn viết số phần và tên mỗi phần. Lưu ý cuối phần loại bỏ lưu ý bên dưới nếu đây là phần cuối theo dàn ý. Bắt buộc không để khán giả nhận ra kết thúc phần, không được gợi cảm giác, đợi phần tiếp theo hoặc chuyện này sẽ kể sau. Tránh mọi câu trục dạ trường hội. ChatGPT đã nói Part 8, The Silent Cut, when I finally stopped answering, 890 words. That night, the phone rang 4 times before I finally unplugged it. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. There's a big difference. Anger still expects something. Being finished means you've collected all the facts and walked away without making a scene. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains and hit the spot where Lauren's lilies used to sit. I'd thrown them out, but a faint trace of their scent still hung in the air. Cloying, artificial, hard to get rid of. I brewed my coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through my voicemail. 5 new messages overnight. The first was from Michael, voice tight and polite, like someone reporting a small fire he didn't want to admit starting. Elaine, it's me. Just wanted to check on you. Lauren's really upset. Can you give us a call? Delete. The second was from Lauren herself. Mom, I think we both said things we didn't mean. You've always been my rock, and I don't know what's gotten into you lately. Please call me back. Delete. The third one came from an unknown number. Abby's voice. Grandma, Mom's crying. I don't know what's going on, but I think you should talk to her. I paused before hitting delete. Abby's voice didn't sound manipulative, it sounded confused, and that's what stung the most. Lauren was pulling her into the mess like a defense shield. I saved that one, not because I planned to respond, but because it reminded me who I was doing this for. I called the phone company next. Yes, I'd like to remove 2 additional lines from my plan, I said. Effective immediately. Are you sure? The representative asked. They're both linked to family members. I'm sure, I said. They're old numbers. When the call ended, I felt something lift. It wasn't joy or satisfaction, more like the slow exhale of a breath I'd been holding for years. By noon, the silence had settled in deep. I walked through the house, every step echoing in ways it hadn't before. Funny how quiet can sound so alive once you stop filling it with other people's noise. Around 2, a knock came at the door, not the polite kind, sharp, urgent. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Mom, Lauren's voice, muffled but firm. I know you're in there. I didn't move. I just want to talk. I stared at the door handle, half expecting it to rattle, but she didn't try to force it. She just stood there, voice rising, like she was talking to a courtroom instead of a person. You're being unreasonable. You can't just cut us off like this. We're family. Silence. Then softer. Please. I didn't answer. After a while, her footsteps retreated. The car engine started, then faded down the street. That was the moment I realized something profound. Silence isn't a weapon. It's proof. It shows exactly who can't live without the noise they created. Later that afternoon, I got an email from the mortgage company confirming the payment had failed again. They attached a polite warning about late fees and potential collection notices. I forwarded it straight to Lauren's email with a single line. Talk to your bank. Nothing else. No greeting, no signature. Just clarity. An hour later, another email pinged in. Lauren, are you serious right now? You're really doing this? After everything we've done for you? Me, yes. That was the end of the conversation. I took the stack of financial papers from the kitchen drawer and put them into the safe with the rest of my documents. For the first time in my life, the word safe actually meant something. The next day, I spent the morning cleaning. I took down the grey curtains Lauren once called modern and replaced them with the floral ones she'd said looked dated. I opened every window, let the air sweep through the rooms, let the dust of years scatter into sunlight. By afternoon, the house felt different, not new, just honest. I made a sandwich, poured myself a glass of iced tea and ate on the porch while the world carried on without drama. Across the street, Mrs. Holloway waved from her mailbox, and for the first time in months, I waved back. When Abby called again that evening, I answered. Grandma, she said quietly, Mom's been crying all day. She'll be fine, I said. I think she's scared, Abby added. She says you hate her. I don't hate anyone, I said, but I love myself enough to stop being someone's convenience. Abby was quiet for a long time. I think I understand. I know you do, I said. That's why I trust you. Her voice wavered. Are you mad at me? Not even a little, I said. But you don't have to fix this. That's not your job. We talked about her classes, about how she was learning to drive, normal things. It felt good. No manipulation, no guilt, just 2 people talking because they wanted to. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen sink watching the last bit of sunlight fade over the yard. The lavender bush swayed in the breeze. The phone buzzed one more time that night. A text from Lauren. Lauren, I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen until the message dimmed. Then I turned the phone off completely and dropped it into the drawer with the rest of the noise I didn't need. When I climbed into bed, the house felt still again. Not empty, just quiet enough to hear my own breathing steady and calm. That's how I knew I'd finally done it. Not the revenge, not the punishment, just the freedom of silence that didn't ask for permission to exist. The silence lasted 3 days. Then came the fallout. It started with a knock that wasn't for me. a delivery man dropping off a certified letter from the mortgage company. I signed for it, though the envelope wasn't addressed to me. Lauren Hayes in bold black print. Old habits die hard. I used to open her mail just to make sure nothing urgent got lost. This time, I didn't. I set it aside on the counter and made breakfast. By noon, my phone lit up with a text from Michael. Michael, the mortgage company called me, said the account's frozen. Can we talk? Me, no. 5 minutes later, another text. Lauren, you had no right. You ruined everything. Do you even care what happens to us? No, I thought, not anymore. That afternoon, I stepped outside to trim the lavender bush. The air was warm, heavy with that late summer smell of grass and endings. Across the street, Mrs. Holloway waved again, the way she did every day now. Funny thing about setting boundaries, it makes you visible to people who actually respect them. I was halfway through cutting the overgrown stems when I saw Abby walking up the driveway, her backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back like she meant business. "Hey, Grandma," she said softly. "Hey yourself," I replied. "You look like someone with news." She sat on the porch step. "Mom's been losing it. She and Dad are fighting all the time. She says it's your fault." "Of course she does," I said, clipping another stem. "Blame's easier than reflection." "She said you cut them off financially," Abby went on. "Dad's trying to fix things, but..." She trailed off, tugging at a loose thread on her sleeve. "But..." "She maxed out 3 of your cards before you shut them down." Abby said quietly, "He just found out. He's furious." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I knelt by the lavender and started gathering the trimmed stems into a small bundle. "You know what the funny thing about trust is, Abby?" I asked. "What?" "It's like glass. You can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks." She didn't speak, just nodded slowly. After a moment, she said, "Dad's been quiet. He looks tired. I think he's realizing what she did." "Good," I said. "He should." She hesitated. "I don't think she's sorry." "She's not," I said. "People like your mother don't apologize. They regroup." Abby exhaled, shoulders heavy. "What happens now?" I smiled faintly. "Now we live honestly." We went inside and I made lemonade. She sat at the table, flipping through her phone. "You know," she said after a minute, "I've been thinking about getting a job after school. Maybe at the bakery." I looked up. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," she said. "I want to earn my own money, not the way Mom does." That made me pause. There it was, that spark of independence that had skipped a generation. "Do it," I said. "It'll feel good to know what's yours." She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need approval to exist. When she left that afternoon, I went back to the kitchen and opened the drawer with the manila folder marked Truth. I added a new label under it, Closure. Not because I planned to stop keeping records, old habits again, but because I needed a place to store proof that I'd survived. By evening, the consequences had picked up speed. Lauren called again. I let it ring. Then another call, from the credit card company this time. They wanted to confirm a suspected fraudulent signature. I laughed so hard the cat ran out of the room. It didn't take long for word to spread. In small towns, it never does. At the grocery store, a neighbour stopped me by the dairy aisle. "Heard there's been some trouble," she whispered. "Everything okay, Elaine?" "Better than okay," I said. I finally cleaned house. That night, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I saw headlights pull into the driveway. Lauren's car, of course. She stepped out, hair messy, eyes red, wearing the same bravado she used to wear to PTA meetings when she'd forgotten to do her part. She didn't come up the porch, just stood by the car, yelling across the lawn. "You're destroying our family!" I took a slow sip. "No, Lauren, I just stopped financing the performance." Her voice cracked. "You think you're so righteous? You think cutting us off makes you strong?" "No," I said calmly. "It makes me free." She glared for a second longer before turning back to the car. "You'll regret this," she said. "I doubt it," I replied. She drove off, tyres kicking gravel. The sound faded and all that was left was the steady hum of crickets. Inside, I found the cherry tart I'd bought a few days ago, the one I'd been saving for Abby, and cut myself a small piece. It tasted sweeter than I remembered. The next morning, I got a text from Abby. "Abby, she's still angry, but I told her I'm spending the weekend with you." "Good, I'll make pancakes." "Abby, with extra butter?" "Always." I smiled, set the phone down and looked out at the lavender in the yard. It wasn't perfect, patchy, uneven, but alive. That was enough. When I walked back into the kitchen, the morning light spilled across the table, touching the empty space where Lauren's lilies used to sit. And for once, I didn't feel the absence. I felt the air filling it. The house felt warmer that morning, sunlight coming through the blinds in neat stripes across the kitchen floor. The lavender scent still clung to my hands from yesterday's trimming. Abby would be coming by in the afternoon, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was visiting me, not what I had to give. Before she arrived, I sat at my desk and pulled out a sheet of thick cream-coloured paper, the kind that makes pens glide differently. I stared at it for a minute, then began to write. Not because I was sentimental, but because I'd learned that if you don't write your truth down, someone else will rewrite it for you. Dear Abby, by the time you read this, you'll probably know more than I ever wanted you to about how ugly love can get when it turns into ownership. I don't want you to remember these weeks as the time your family fell apart. I want you to remember it as the time the truth came out into the light, even if it burned a little. You're smart, kind, and more like me than you realise. That's both a blessing and a warning. We forgive too easily. And sometimes we think forgiveness means letting people keep their seats at tables they already flipped over. It doesn't. Forgiveness is just peace without permission. I built my life thinking love meant giving until there was nothing left to give. Your mother learned that habit from me, then twisted it into something else. Don't repeat either of our mistakes. Give, but never surrender your dignity. And when people try to guilt you for setting boundaries, remember this: no one who truly loves you will be offended by your peace. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope. Then I opened another drawer, pulled out a small wooden box and added the envelope to it. Inside was everything that mattered. The new trust documents, the key to the safety deposit box, a few family photos that hadn't been poisoned by memories. I locked it and slid it back under the desk. After that, I went to the backyard. The grass was still wet from last night's rain, and the air carried that soft smell of earth that always reminded me of mornings long before Lauren learned to lie. I sat down on the porch steps with my coffee, watching the way the light hit the lavender patch. It struck me how quiet the world sounded now that I'd stopped explaining myself to people who never listened. At noon, Abby arrived, hair pulled up in a messy bun, a notebook tucked under her arm. "I hope I'm not too early," she said, grinning. "You're right on time," I said. "You hungry?" "Always." We made pancakes, her stirring the batter, me pretending not to notice she used too much sugar, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and warmth, something honest. While we ate, she glanced around the room. "It's so calm here," she said. "That's the goal," I said. "Chaos doesn't pay rent anymore." She smiled, but her eyes carried a shadow. "Mom said some things last night," she murmured. "I'm sure she did. She said you're trying to turn me against her." I leaned back. "Did it work?" She laughed softly. "No, I know how she gets when she's scared." I nodded. "Fear makes people creative." Abby picked at the edge of her plate. "I just don't understand how she could do that to you." "You will one day," I said. "Not because you'll do it, but because you'll see how easy it is for people to lose themselves in their need to be in control." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you think she'll ever change?" "I think she'll try when she realises manipulation doesn't pay the bills," I said. "But change isn't an apology, it's proof." Abby nodded slowly. "I wish I could fix it." You can't, I said gently. "But you can learn from it, that's more important." She looked at me for a long moment before smiling. "I'm glad you're not mad at me." "I could never be mad at you," I said. "You remind me of what I still believe in." After we ate, she helped me clean up. I watched her move around the kitchen, careful and thoughtful, so unlike her mother. When she reached for a towel, her bracelet caught the light. Silver, delicate, the one I'd given her last Christmas. That small glint made something inside me ease. "Grandma," she said quietly, "do you ever miss how things used to be?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I also remember that peace never lived in that version of our family. I miss the idea of it, not the reality." She nodded, as if that made sense. When she left that afternoon, I walked her to the car. The air was heavier, clouds moving in again. She hugged me tight before getting in. "I love you," she said. "I know," I said, smiling. And that's why I trust you." I stood there until her car turned the corner, then went back inside. The house was quiet again, but not the lonely kind. It was the kind of silence that feels earned. I walked to the fireplace, picked up a small bundle of old papers, Lauren's apology letter, one she'd dropped in my mailbox a few days back. It was written on fancy stationery, her handwriting looping neatly across the page. I'd read it once. It said all the right words and meant none of them. I set it in the fireplace, struck a match and watched the flame catch. The paper curled, turned black at the edges and disappeared into ash. I stood there a while, feeling the heat on my face. The smell of burning ink was strangely satisfying. When the fire went out, I turned off the light and sat down at my desk again. The house was still, the kind of stillness that tells you nothing's missing. Everything unnecessary is simply gone. The envelope for Abby sat safe in the box below. I didn't need to add anything more. The words were enough. The morning after I burned Lauren's letter, the air smelled cleaner. Not like smoke, just honest. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to the sound of my phone buzzing, my name being pulled in 10 directions. It was quiet, and it was mine. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out at the yard. The grass shimmered under dew, the lavender standing tall after the storm. A few petals had fallen, but that's what happens after growth. Something always sheds. By mid-morning, I found myself cleaning out the attic. There were boxes stacked from floor to ceiling, each one labelled in handwriting I barely recognised. Lauren's College, Taxes 2002, Mark's Tools. I opened one labelled Lauren's Things and found old trophies, faded ribbons, and a stack of thank you cards she'd written me over the years. "Thanks for helping with rent again. You're the best, Mom. I'll pay you back soon. I don't know what I'd do without you." It was like reading a script she'd rehearsed her whole life. I packed everything neatly and taped the box shut. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't need it in sight. Later, I drove into town. The bakery girl waved as I walked in, already knowing what I wanted. "Cherry tart," she said. "2," I replied. "One for me, one for my granddaughter." When I got home, Abby's car was already in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch reading one of her thick paperbacks. "You've been here long?" I asked. "Not really," she said, closing the book. "I like it here. It's quiet." "That's the word of the week," I said, handing her the tart. "You're going to get spoiled." She grinned. "That's your job, isn't it?" We sat on the porch steps, eating in silence for a while. The world felt still, but not in that tense way it used to. More like the calm that comes after you've cleaned something that's been sticky for too long. After a few minutes, Abby said, "Dad's thinking about moving out." I glanced at her. "Out of the house?" She nodded. "Yeah, he said things haven't been right for a long time. I think he's tired." "That makes 2 of us," I said quietly. She looked at me, eyes soft but curious. "Do you think he'll leave her?" I took a sip of tea. Sometimes leaving isn't about packing a bag. Sometimes it's just about stopping the pretending. She nodded like she understood, which surprised me. 17 and already grasping what most adults never do. We talked about her plans after graduation, about the college she wanted to attend, about scholarships and jobs. When she mentioned she might stay close to home so she could help me out, I shook my head. "Don't you dare," I said. "Go live your life. Help yourself first. That's the only kind of help that lasts." She smiled. "You sound like one of those motivational posters." "Except mine come with pie," I said. The afternoon light shifted golden across the porch. She leaned her head on my shoulder for a while, and I thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. It wasn't grand gestures or apologies. It was quiet afternoons and honest company. After she left, I walked through the house again. I'd already changed the locks, cancelled the joint accounts and moved my savings into the trust, but something still felt unfinished. Not wrong, just waiting. Then I saw the framed picture on the mantel, Lauren at 25 holding Abby as a baby. Both smiling, both full of something that used to be love. I picked it up, dusted it off and set it back down, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder of what I'd survived. I spent the rest of the evening rearranging the furniture. I moved the old armchair by the window where the light was softest. I hung a new painting I'd found at a thrift store, a quiet landscape, a road disappearing into trees. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like peace looked. At sunset, I made myself dinner, nothing elaborate, just grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and a glass of white wine. I'd gone years without drinking alone because it used to make me feel lonely, but that night it just tasted clean. The phone buzzed once. A text from Lauren. "Lauren, I hope you're proud of yourself. You've made everyone miserable." I deleted it without reading it twice. That woman could keep her misery. It wasn't a family heirloom I planned to pass down. Before bed, I opened the window. The cool air rolled in, carrying the scent of lavender and wet earth. I stood there for a while, breathing it in. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and a train passed on the far side of town. Just normal sounds, ordinary life. It struck me how rare that had felt before all of this. Normal. I turned off the light, sat down on the bed and looked around. No shadows waiting in corners, no dread of the phone ringing, just me and the quiet I'd earned. That's when it hit me. Not as an epiphany, but as a slow, steady truth. I hadn't rebuilt my life from ruins. I just finally cleared out everything that didn't belong. The walls weren't new, the floor wasn't different, and yet somehow the space felt brand new. I didn't smile or cry. I just lay back and let the silence settle over me like a blanket that had been waiting all this time. It happened on a Sunday morning. The kind of morning that starts quietly with the soft clinking of dishes and the smell of toast. I'd been reading on the porch, feet tucked under a blanket, the sunlight catching the rim of my coffee cup just right. Peace had finally learned my address. Then I heard it. 3 knocks at the door. Slow, deliberate. I didn't need to look to know who it was. When I opened it, Lauren stood there. Same eyes, same perfume, same tired charm, but her face looked different. There were lines that hadn't been there before, and not the kind you earn from laughter. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I thought about saying no. The words almost made it to my tongue, but instead I stepped aside. "Wipe your shoes." She hesitated, then did as told, just like she used to when she was a kid coming in from the yard. Some habits die harder than pride. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once placed those forged papers with her fake smile. The same table where the poison plan began. She looked around. "You changed things?" "I had to," I said. The old layout didn't fit anymore. She gave a small nod. Her hands were clasped tight, her nails short and uneven. For a woman who used to live polished, it looked like life had been sanding her down. "I wanted to see you," she said. "It's been months." "I know," I said. "I've been going to counselling," she said quickly, like she needed to hand me the proof before I could shut the door. "They said I should take accountability." "Did they also say what that word means?" She swallowed. "It means I stop blaming everyone else for what I did." "That's a start," I said. Silence filled the space between us, thick but not sharp. She shifted in her seat, then looked at the window. "I lost the house," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "I read the notice in the paper." She blinked, surprised. "You did?" "I keep up with the neighbourhood," I said. A faint, humourless laugh escaped her. "Michael left, said he couldn't take it anymore. Abby stays with me on weekends sometimes, but she prefers being here." "Can't blame her," I said. She didn't argue, just nodded. "You're right." That was new. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. "I wrote you something." I didn't take it. "I don't need another letter, Lauren. This one's different," she said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say, I know I hurt you." Her voice cracked at the word hurt. It wasn't rehearsed this time. It was raw, trembling, unsteady. The way truth sounds when it finally stops editing itself. I looked at her. Really looked. For years I'd seen a version of my daughter built on guilt and excuses, but this time I saw something closer to human. Someone who'd fallen hard enough to scrape the illusion off her face. "Why now?" I asked. "Why after all this time?" She exhaled slowly. "Because I finally realised you didn't betray me. I betrayed you, and I can't live pretending it didn't happen." Her words landed softly, but they didn't dig the way apologies used to. Maybe because I wasn't standing on the same ground anymore. I poured her some tea, out of habit more than forgiveness. She took the cup with both hands, like it was something fragile. "I'm not asking to move back into your life," she said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry and that I understand if you never trust me again." I nodded. "You're right. I don't." She winced, then nodded too. "Fair." We sat there for a long time without talking. The tea cooled, the air thickened. and a bird landed on the windowsill like it was checking if peace could survive the company. After a while, she said, "I heard about the fund you started. The Lavender Fund?" "Yeah," she said, "helping older women who've been taken advantage of. That's good, Mom. That's really good." I gave a small smile. "It helps me sleep." Her eyes watered again. "You always turn pain into purpose." "No," I said. "I just stop giving pain permission to stay." She nodded, wiping her cheek. "I wish I'd learned that from you sooner." "Maybe you still can," I said. She looked down at her empty cup, then pushed the envelope toward me. "You don't have to read it. I just needed to leave it somewhere real." I didn't stop her. When she stood to leave, she hesitated by the door. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, Lauren, I don't hate you. I just finally love myself enough not to need you." Her lips trembled. "I don't know what to say to that." Then don't," I said. "Go live differently. That'll say enough." She nodded once, then turned and walked down the steps. Her car engine hummed faintly before fading down the road. I stayed by the window watching the dust rise behind her tyres. For the first time in years, her leaving didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like closure. I looked down at the envelope she'd left on the table. My name was written in shaky handwriting, like she'd been afraid of the pen. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, I placed it under the vase of lavender on the counter. If it stayed there forever, that was fine. Some apologies don't need to be read. They just need to be heard by the silence that finally learned how to listen. Download as audio. A few weeks after Lauren's visit, the mornings began to feel lighter. The air had that hint of change that comes right before autumn in Georgia, when the humidity lets go and the sky finally breathes again. I'd been spending more time outside lately, trimming the garden, fixing the fence, even repainting the porch swing that had been leaning since last spring. It was on one of those mornings that Abby showed up holding a manila folder and 2 coffees. "For you," she said, handing me the cup with the blue lid. "And this," she waved the folder, "it's for my school project. They asked us to write about someone who inspired us." "Oh," I said, smiling. "Who'd you pick?" She grinned. "You." I laughed, setting the coffee down before I could spill it. "You should have warned me. I would have worn something more impressive." "You don't need to," she said, sliding into the porch chair across from me. "You already have a better story than anyone I know." "Is that so?" She nodded. "Most people write about celebrities or activists. I wrote about you and the Lavender Fund." I tilted my head. "You even remembered the name." She smiled proudly. "How could I forget? You turned what Mom did into something that helps other women. That's the best kind of revenge." I couldn't help but chuckle. "It's not revenge, sweetheart. It's restoration," she shrugged. "Whatever you call it, it's powerful." She opened the folder and read aloud from the first page. Her voice was steady, confident. "My grandmother, Lane Porter, taught me that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over power. When people hurt you, it's not about winning against them. It's about winning yourself back." I felt something in my chest tighten, not sadness, not pride, just the kind of emotion that sneaks up quietly when you realize your pain actually built something. "That's good writing," I said softly. She grinned. "I had a good subject." We spent the rest of the morning in the garden. Abby helped me gather lavender stems into small bundles, tying them with twine. "These smell so good," she said. "You could sell them." "I'm not in the business of selling peace," I said, "but I do give it away for free." She laughed, and the sound filled the air in a way that felt like everything had finally come full circle. Later, we went inside so I could show her something. I took the small wooden box from under my desk, the one with the trust papers and the letter I'd written her. "This is for you," I said, setting it on the table. "When you turn 18, it's yours." Her eyes widened. "What is it?" "Everything that's mine and everything I want to leave behind," I said. "The fund, the documents, the house eventually. It's all arranged in your name." She froze. "Grandma, that's too much." "No," I said. "It's just enough. You earned it by being the one person who never asked for more than what was fair." Her lip trembled and she looked down at her hands. "Mom's not going to like that." "I know," I said calmly. "But it's time she learned that some things can't be taken by signature." Abby reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'll take care of it. I promise." "I know you will," I said. The afternoon light shifted, falling in soft golden patterns on the table. For a while, we just sat there drinking tea, listening to the wind brush against the windows. At some point, she asked, "Do you think Mom will ever really change?" I took a breath. People don't change all at once. Sometimes they just stop lying to themselves for a little while, and if they're lucky, they keep that truth alive long enough to do some good. Abby nodded slowly. I hope she finds that. So do I said. When she left that evening, she hugged me tighter than usual. I'm proud of you, Grandma, she said. I smiled. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you. After she drove off, I sat back down at the table and looked at the wooden box. The lavender bunches we'd tied were laid out beside it, their soft scent filling the room. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive in its quiet way. I walked over to the fireplace and lit a candle, the small flame flickering in the fading light. Every story leaves something behind, sometimes a scar, sometimes a lesson. Mine had left both. But the scar no longer hurt. It just reminded me where the healing began. Before bed, I checked the front porch one last time. The night air carried the faint hum of crickets, and the porch swing creaked gently in the wind. I thought about all the women out there like me, mothers, daughters, wives, who'd mistaken silence for surrender. And I hoped that somehow through the Lavender Fund or through Abby's story, they'd learn what I finally did. That silence can speak louder than any argument if it comes from strength instead of fear. I blew out the candle and turned off the light. The lavender bundles on the counter glowed faintly in the moonlight. Everything was in its place, just as it should be. The first real cold morning of fall arrived quietly. The air was sharp, the kind that clears your lungs whether you like it or not. I woke up before sunrise, the house still wrapped in that soft blue-grey light that makes everything look gentle, even the scars on old furniture. I didn't turn on the TV or check the news. I just brewed my coffee and stood by the window, watching the fog roll through the yard. The lavender had gone pale now, their purple fading into silver. They looked tired but proud, the way survivors always do. There was a calm in that morning that didn't ask for permission. It didn't feel like an ending or a beginning, just life, unbothered. After breakfast, I took the small wooden box from the cabinet. I decided it was time to visit the lawyer again, not to add anything new, but to deliver something final. The documents were in order. Abby's trust, the legal revocations, the fund's non-profit certification, everything neat and complete. When I got to Richard Davidson's office, he smiled when he saw me. "Back so soon?" he asked. "Just tying up loose ends," I said. We went over everything once more, every line, every signature. He was a careful man, steady hands, good memory. When he handed me the final confirmation forms, I noticed the date in the corner, exactly 1 year since my husband's death. Funny how life loops around like that, turning grief into a full circle you don't see coming. "You've done good work, Elaine," he said. "You've built something lasting." I nodded. "I just didn't want my silence to die with me." He smiled faintly. "Then you've made sure it won't." When I left the office, the town looked different. Maybe it was just me seeing it with clear eyes for once. The coffee shop where Lauren used to brag about her business meetings had closed down. The hardware store had a new owner, young and polite. People nodded as I passed, not out of pity, but respect. Small towns can be cruel, but they can also be kind when you stop feeding them gossip. At home, Abby was waiting on the porch. She held a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon rolls. "Early lunch," she said. "Bribery," I said, smiling. She grinned. "Guilty." We sat on the porch, unwrapping the pastries, letting the warm sugar stick to our fingers. She told me she'd been accepted into her first-choice college. "Full scholarship," she said proudly. I stared at her for a moment, the wind catching strands of her hair. "Your mother must be proud," I said. "She cried when I told her," Abby said softly. "But it felt different this time. She didn't try to make it about her." "That's a good sign," I said. "People grow, even if it takes a few storms." Abby took a bite, then said, "Mom asked about you." "Oh?" She said she's volunteering at the community centre, helping with financial workshops, said she learned a lot about what not to do. I let out a slow breath. Maybe she's finally using her mistakes as a lesson instead of a weapon. "She wanted me to tell you thank you," Abby said. I didn't answer right away. Words like that don't land easily after all the damage they travelled through. But I nodded. You just did. For a while, we sat in comfortable silence. Then Abby said, "You know what's funny? Everyone at school thinks you're this mysterious, tough lady who doesn't take any nonsense. But to me, you're just Grandma with the lavender garden." "That's the best compliment I've ever had," I said. She laughed, and I felt something warm loosen in my chest. It was the kind of laugh that tells you everything is okay, not perfect, but steady. After she left, I went back to the garden. The sun had climbed higher, cutting through the last of the fog. The lavender stems brushed against my jeans as I walked through them, whispering in the wind. I reached the old wooden fence at the back of the yard and stood there, looking at the open field beyond. It stretched farther than I'd ever really noticed before. Wide, quiet, forgiving. That's when I realized something simple. All this time, I hadn't been fighting for justice or revenge. I'd been fighting for space to breathe, to exist without being defined by someone else's noise. I turned back toward the house. The windows caught the light, the glass clean and still. There was no bitterness left in me, no trace of the anger that used to wake me up at night, just calm. Inside, I sat at my desk and wrote a single line on a scrap of paper. Not a letter, not a speech, just one sentence I wanted to remember. She tried to take my peace, so I gave her silence instead. I tucked it into the wooden box right above Abby's letter. Then I opened the back door, stepped outside, and let the wind carry through the rooms. The curtains lifted, the air shifted, and everything felt lighter. The house didn't hold secrets anymore, just stories, real ones, the kind that end quietly without applause because they don't need it. The lavender swayed in the afternoon sun, a sea of silver, green and purple, bending but never breaking. And for the first time, I didn't think about what was lost. I thought about what remained. Peace, freedom, and a kind of silence that finally sounded like home. When I look back, it still amazes me how something as small as a whisper over dinner could unravel an entire life and rebuild it stronger. This wasn't just about a daughter's betrayal or a mother's revenge. It was about reclaiming the right to live without fear, without being used, and without apologizing for setting boundaries. The truth is, most revenge stories don't end with fire or shouting. Real family revenge stories, the kind that come from betrayal and silence, end with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't ask for attention, it just stays. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever faced betrayal inside your own family, or if you simply love powerful family drama and revenge stories where justice comes quietly but perfectly, subscribe to this channel. Here, we tell stories that remind you strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone finally choosing themselves.